And it's another Brahmas game on ABC. Stop me if you've heard this before. In fact, I think at this point, ABC has become the official network of the San Antonio Brahmas. And how ironic is it that DC actually had to play in San Antonio just to get on ABC? We've been relegated to FX all year, ESPN2. We've been blocked for sitcoms in certain games. Pickleball was on television, but DC finally back on ABC. It's where you want to be. This is network TV we're talking, right? The mouse. So let's look at the matchup. I said it would be a nice walkthrough for DC to kind of break in that Alamo Dome turf for when they visit there on May 13th. But if they want to do so, they got to get back to the fundamentals here, and that's running the football, right? I understand what's been going on. Defenses have been stacking the box against this rushing attack, taking the run away, trying to make Jordan Ta'amu win it. And he has. Abram Smith had a nice little 3-game run. It started week 5 where he had 379 yards rushing in 3 games. He was held to just 27 yards by that stout Arlington front last week. We told you the Renegades did have the top rush defense, and San Antonio, I would say, is a little bit better against the pass. Not as effective against the run. Nonetheless, that front 7 is still scary. I think you roll with a heavy dose of Rykel Armstead here. The reason being, if Armstead ends up with more carries than Smith, I think just based on the fact that Abram Smith has been healthy all season, and he's been a workhorse. So he's been a high volume, every down back, and he's stayed healthy. So you don't want to jinx yourself here. You want a little more balance and maybe feature Armstead a little more to keep Smith healthy. You're going to need him for the playoff run. The quarterbacks, I thought they played pretty well in the rotation. It was enough to get a win against Arlington. De'Aaron King looked phenomenal on his first drive. So don't get too caught up in the interception. Wind back the tape and you'll see he played very well in the first drive. He was something like 4 of 6 for 65 yards and a score. Obviously, that pick on his next drive is going to be something he ends up regretting. Kind of gave Arlington a little bit of life that they shouldn't have had at the end of the game there. But Jordan Ta'amu threw one too. He wasn't exactly playing leagues above De'Aaron King. Remember, he had a pick to Joe Powell that almost went back to the end zone, if not for a penalty. So keep an eye on all this. The quarterback depth, I thought, was key for DC because it was in a spot where other teams in the XFL simply did not have that luxury of the quarterback depth that DC had. Remember, Eric Dungy was a 3rd-string quarterback for the DC Defenders. He's now moved to the IR. A little bit of a gut punch for a Defenders offense that may face some injuries here. So we wanted to be able to have Dungy. Will not have him. They did sign a quarterback, Jeremy Hickbottom, out of Tennessee State that Reggie Barlow knows from his days there. Now, looking more into this, Lucky Jackson, 1 away from the XFL lead in touchdowns. He caught his 4th and 5th touchdown passes against Arlington Saturday. That puts him just 1 back of Hakeem Butler and somebody else is tied for the lead. Deontay Burnett. They both have 6. So you know he's gunning for that lead in XFL touchdowns receiving. You pair Lucky Jackson with Chris Blair and now Josh Hammond, who has emerged. Nice little 3-headed monster, that wide receiver. And that San Antonio defense will have the task at stopping them. Obviously, some ballers in the secondary between Luke Barku, Tenny Adewusi, Cam Kelly, some of those guys, and who I think is probably the best defensive player in the XFL who doesn't get enough credit, linebacker Jordan Williams, who leads the league in solo tackles, combined tackles, TFLs, just an absolute machine in this defense. Delonte Scott, Drew Beasley, studs up front rushing the passer. So it should be a great matchup, right? This DC offensive line against a really tough front 4 and even really a front 7 for Jim Herman's Brahmas. Let's flip sides of the ball. The DC pass defense, very interesting case because they actually do give up more yards than anybody in the league. That number is like 260, and that's not good enough by any means. But they also have 4 pick sixes on the season, 4 pick sixes that each ended up winning them football games. That DJ Swearinger pick ended up turning the entire momentum of that game around in Arlington. They ran the double move with Brandon Arconato. You saw Bob Stoops on the sideline. Like, you cannot do that against this defense. So it's a little love and hate with the DC secondary, right? Giving up a lot of yards, but also creating havoc for quarterbacks. Important to look at the injury report here. DeJuan Neal, Kentrell Bryce, two guys that both went down against Arlington. And I was a little worried, right? Because I know those are really key members of this secondary, and you'd have a lot of depth there that would have to step up. Those guys did eventually end up coming back. As far as practice this week, DeJuan Neal practicing with an injured shoulder. Kentrell Bryce has not practiced with a leg, so monitor their status there. The good news for DC, they're up against the league's worst passing offense. So I think some of the guys that just signed on, Swearinger, Isaiah Johnson, will be able to fill in nicely if Kentrell Bryce can't go. Santos Ramirez, another guy who should be good to go, and he's been a stud this entire season. Michael Joseph. So hopefully that DC pass defense will be able to put something together that is good enough to make a playoff run, and it starts here. Who is the X factor for San Antonio, may you ask? Nick Hawley. Remember, we talk about San Antonio being the worst pass offense in the league. That has absolutely nothing to do with Nick Hawley. He spent most of the season as a Houston Roughneck, and in this game, Nick Hawley knows that if he wins and Arlington loses on Sunday, he will get a crack for revenge at the Houston Roughnecks who cut him. He knows that team inside and out. He's been a fan favorite in H-Town dating back to XFL 2020. He goes off last week, 4 catches, 105 yards. So be on the lookout for Nick Hawley. Obviously, I'm rolling with my DC Defenders. I think it was a great point Mikey Manziel made to me on the phone about that extra grand. A lot of you are thinking the narrative here is that DC is going to rest the starters. Well, we're not in the NFL, right? This is the XFL where players get an incentive for winning games at $1,000 of a game bonus. They also want every opportunity they possibly can to get more reps on film. I don't think Jordan will be on a snap count. Abram Smith may say a little split action because they have the ability with Armstead. You're going to see the defensive starters play and the offensive line, of course, because you don't have backups. So this, to me, would have been an absolute lock. I am more worried about the San Antonio Brahmas having everything to play for, right? Where DC can just run through the motions, even if they do play their starters. I would be comfortable betting 3. It is not a best bet. I almost wish DC had something to play for here, Zook. The reason being, I would have been all over this. This would have been a 5X, 10X max play, whatever you call it. There is that element for me where this could get very weird with San Antonio in wounded animal mode. Do you share that sentiment? Is this a stay away for you because of the narrative that's been created?
Yeah, I'm concerned about them resting players and not knowing how they're going to go about it.
Right.
Are they on snap counts? This is something I would personally stay away from. I mean, money line wise,
minus 140, I think we had it at.
Like, if you're going to go there, I'd jump on a money line or something.
It's so interesting because everybody's like, this number should be way more. DC goes from an 8.5-point favorite against Arlington, where they did not cover, to a 3-point favorite against a worse team, just based on the fact that they have nothing left to play for. We're seeing this in the next game that we end up covering with Houston. I
wonder if some of that has to do with DC's given up a lot of points over the past 4 or 5
yeah, the
weeks.
scoring defense has not been great.
So the defense is not as good as we thought, I would say. They're still good, don't get me wrong, but they're not as good as everybody was saying. So
the numbers have been, like I said, number 8 pass defense in the league, right? Not acceptable. You're not going to win a championship with those numbers. They have to get better in the playoffs, and I think they will. This is just, if you're going to bet this game, maybe live, right, is a look for you. You kind of got to know, right, what's going on and how the game is flowing, maybe.
Yeah.
But the sports books are going to be on top of that, right?
I think you might, if you're going to do anything, jump on a first half.
Right. Like if DC comes out guns blazing and you know right away, Smith is in, Tamu's in, the starting receivers are in, and they're playing like they don't care about any of this that we're talking about. that line's going to jump early. So we'll see. This is a weird one. I really wish I could bet it. I almost wish DC did have something to play for other than $1,000.
This is one where you want the game to start out with San Antonio scoring a touchdown.
Yeah.
Let that line move, bet it live, and then, I mean,
hope that DC's talent. They're much more talented.
You're going to take DC from there, but you're going to get a lot of value out of it. So
this defense could cause fits for Jack Cohn. Davin Bellamy, I'm not sure they have anybody that can block him. I mean, they got some players coming. And you know Greg Williams, he likes to blitz. If Jack Cohn can't stay up, we're talking about Paxton Lynch.